What's going on, you guys? How you doing today? So 4 months ago I announced that I started to work on my first base library for Kontakt 5. And today I'm about to introduce it to you all, explain how it works and why you may want to give it a try. On top of that I'll give you starter pack of 7 reference processing models. And all that shit is completely for free this time. So just before we will go for it, let me pull out series of printed examples of its performance to give you basic idea of its potential. I'll break it down for you in the second half of this video, so check this out. So here it is. As you can see, I decided to make background simple and informative, so it's easy to figure out how to control the instrument by velocity and key switches. Huge shout out to my friend Alex who got my back with that fire background design. And also to Kostas Spades from Chronosphere who was hired for recording content for this library, and goddamn he nailed it good. I'll put some links related to this guys in the video description, so please check them out because this whole thing wouldn't be possible without them. Speaking of library content, we've got 6 strings. Each string cover the fretboard from 0 to 15 fret, which means that total amount of notes is 96. Each note contains 65 unique samples. Most of this value comes from the main upstroke and main downstroke articulations. Each contains 15 samples, and that's basically why it's called main. Not too hard, not too soft, just regular picking that you need to use most of the time. This is basically what's make a difference from other libraries. Because of such a big amount of variations it's really hard to spot round robin cycles. So it's kinda closer to real bassist performance, or at least I used to think so. This amount of variations got your back in case of humanization, so you don't need to care about it anymore. Speaking of others, it's 5 samples per each type of articulation. Important to say that length of slides is linked to your project tempo, just be sure to keep external synchronization active. By the way, they only available for fret range in between 7 and 15 fret for strings from 3rd to 6th, so keep that in mind. We've also got this noise trigger here if you that type of person who like to drink tea with pinky up. And last thing is key switch control. In case of this instrument, you need to manually write your key switch positions. There is no default mapping system, just because it would make the instrument good in case of one tuning, and completely weird in case of other. However though, I found the way to simplify the process using pre-composing in Guitar Pro 5. As you can see, we have 2 tracks, one for the actual bass part and another one for key switch control, which gonna tell the instrument which string to use. Here by the way you can see the tuning of Chronos. First of all, Let's go ahead and copy this arrangement to key switch track, and then replace all the notes with zeros. I think you get the idea that tuning of this track matches key switch positions of VSTI, so this way we can get separated MIDI for key switch control. However, though I used to do it one octave higher to avoid of them errors caused by using too low notes on it, so keep that in mind, we're gonna transpose it back later. Now let's switch to bass track to work on articulations by using different dynamic ranges with these associations. So at first highlight entire track and change it to double F. Just because main downstroke is the most common articulation. Now let's remove slide automation from this note and replace it with triple P, which responsible for slow slide down. And now I just filling rest of the arrangement with main upstrokes to alternate the hits and bring up some odd pulsation, plus couple of soft downstrokes at some places where I want additional randomization or just want to have extra soft sounding. Please keep in mind that what you see is pretty much scripted to demonstrate best case scenario. At this point I already know what kind of articulations I want to use. So most of the time I do recommend just to fill your part with main downstrokes and slides articulation and finish it in the actual template later. Frankly with you, most of the time I just go for main downstroke only. You don't really need alternate picking 95% of the time. Alright, I'm done with dynamics editing. Now let's export the MIDI and import it to Cubase. Okay, we're ready for post-editing of MIDI. Now you can see me deleting all unnecessary automations such as main volume and all the other stuff in exception of velocity and slide automations. I don't even know what's most of the stuff is, so maybe you don't need to do it and I just get too paranoid. As I already said, transpose key switches one octave down. Unite the tracks and move it to Chronos channel. Now let's give it a final touch. First of all, at the very end of the song we've got two strings triggered at the same time, and at the moment one of them should be missed. The reason is that we can't have more than one key switch at the same time, they shouldn't overlay, so let's separate the notes pretending that the lower one will be picked first and second one with little delay, just as it happens in real life. Now I'm gonna separate key switches, second one should start in between first and second notes. Seem to work now. To finish this up, let's add note release samples. And again, same thing at the end, just in reverse to get proper triggering of note release samples on proper strings. Let's also add low amount of background noise, something like 80. And that's how it sounds now. So that's pretty much it for programming. It may sound like something complex at first, but it's just my dumbass way of explaining things. You will see that it doesn't really take much time when you get used to this method. So before we'll go for processing models, let me just say that I only gonna do basic commenting over processing moves. It's not for educational purposes this time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. So just as always I will share Reaper and Cubase templates with you all, plus whole pack of files for recreation if you use other DAW. All this stuff plus link to the actual instrument will be uploaded to my Patreon, but as I said, you don't need to pledge anything to get it. Post will be open for all. But of course if you decide to support this whole thing, I'll be more than grateful. As a payback you will get some fire content which I privately post there, and what's more important, You will help me to achieve new goals and have bigger budgets on future projects like this one. So without further said and without being ado, let's finally go for processing reviews starting from Chronosphere model. This particular one is kind of special to me, not only because I was the one who mixed this album, but because the entire library has been made with same bass that was used on original recording and played by the hands of same musician, which means that MMG number 7 is now can be used with virtual bass. Pretty much all of these models gonna use parallel processing splitting, so all the time I'm gonna bypass VSTI channels output and send it to multiple FX channels. Just think of it as having not one, but 2 or 3 outputs at the same time. And speaking of routing, it goes like this. That's how each layer sounds. So as you will see here, I only changed few things. Obviously replaced real bass with Chronos, so I used smooth DI correction to match it to original bass tone. Other plugins hasn't been changed in most cases. Here inside of the old chain I used Declick module from old Isotope RX3 to get rid of some clicks and cracks and make the sound smoother. However, this plugin create pretty big delay, so I keep it bypassed just to simplify filming of this video. Originally it should stay there. And another thing is simplified master chain. I used master correction impulse, which includes all the matching and EQ moves from source project, so we kinda have all that one. So speaking of MIDI programming, that's what I'm talked about. As you can see, I don't even use alternate picking, only main downstrokes plus hard downstroke on first note for additional punch where that bass kicks in. For this model you probably want to use 5-string as your root, in between of G and D as lowest note. Here you can see the routing, all them levels and send amounts. And that's how each layer sounds. So at first I reduce low mids with EQ on VSTI channel, then apply Chronosphere DI correction impulse as tembral's starting point. And then apply limiting to have more control on dynamics in front of reamping chain. On SHB drive I use EQ to brighten up the sound in front of the amp, which is obviously SHB1 by Ignite amps. Declicker helps to get rid of some unwanted artifacts. And there is only R47 distortion pedal on similar named channel. Now both of them go to bass bus with Behemoth impulse as our cabinet at first. Then complex control of dynamics. I use to reduce incoming level to get enough headroom for proper work of compressor, however as you can see I compensated that drop on output gain with equal amount. Some polishing with EQ. Again, dropped output, just to make saturator work properly, though I could do it on exciter input gain, doesn't matter. NLS for extra bit of saturation. And limiter at the end of the chain with all-round mode, just to smoothly boost the volume. MIDI programming preferences for this one is the same as previous, I guess, in only exception of tuning. This time your target is 5th string with low A as a root note, or at least something close to that. That's how it's routed. So at first I apply solid mid-range drop on VSTI channel, mostly for proper work of reamping chain. And then use crossover parallel reamping for lows and highs. Basically processing of both is the same, but targeted to independent control of lows and highs. So for low channel I use low pass filter. Then get control on dynamics with Pro C. Important that I do it in front of drive pedal to keep distortion stable. And here is the pedal itself. After I use Declicker for same old reasons. For high channel I use high pass filter, at the same point when previous one ends, plus have little drop of mid-range for whatever reason. Compression. Drive pedal, EQ, and Declicker. Now both channels go to bass bus where we have SHV1 head as main amp. Defiler impulse as a cabinet. Multibin compressor. Almost no compression is applied here, probably because lately I changed something in front of it, but we still get little volume boost of mids and solid boost of highs. NLS saturation. Limiter at the end. Programming preferences for this one is mostly about using 5th string with low A as a root note. You can see that this time I used hard downstrokes only, which is not good in case of humanization, but it still can be replaced with main downstrokes without negative sonic effect. I just feel like I need that extra edge here. Routing stuff. Layers. For drive channel I use low cut filter as first movement. Then shit ton of drive with 6505. Please keep in mind that having bypassed impulse loader is critical here, even if we don't use it at all. Already explained this thing in the past. NLS with solid dose of saturation using meek mode, which basically gives us that wonderful distortion and great amount of dynamics reduction. Keep in mind that we use it in front of the cab, so it works kind of like additional preamp. Low pass filter to get rid of unwanted high-end buzz. For DI dark I use basic 100 head at first. Then apply very slight boost of 10 dB on highs with 5 dB attenuation on output. same crushing make mode on NLS. For DI Bright I use basic 100 head with same settings, the only difference is this treble booster in front of it, that's what makes it bright basically. Love this thing. Same boost of highs with output attenuation. And now we use different console without mic mode this time. Delay to get rid of phase issues between DI and drive channels. And oh by the way, other DI channel have this one as well, same settings. So we basically move drive channel 0.4 milliseconds back. Now all of them go to base group with DSME cab. Some saturation on top of that. Some compression. Some EQ. Little bit of reverb to bring up some space. And limiter at the end of the chain. Programming preferences for this one is 5th string with lowest note around A. As you can see here I used main downstrokes with hard downstrokes. Also little bit of palm muting to be sure that it gents. Kind of. Routing stuff. Here we use pretty common sum of driven and DI types of processing. Love that clean tone by the way. So no any processing on VSTI channel. For drive I use low cut at first, just to keep amp performance cleaner, kinda more focused. 6505. NLS and mic mode for that crushing saturation. And sidechain compressor driven by an process source signal. It's not really the same thing as regular one, because in this case, it responds to clean signal, which still have natural dynamics, unlike distorted one. Basic 100 on DI channel. And then EQ with NLS same way as I already did in previous templates. Delay to fix phase shifts. Cabinet impulse. Multiband compressor for presence control. Little bit of mono reverberation. CLA compressor. And finally limiter. Even though I used lower tuning, here you probably want to use C of 5th string as your root note. Here's the routing. Got to say that this template is probably the most intelligent one because it has an option of using clean or driven mods, but I'll explain it later. That's how them layers sounds. Let's start with drive channel. Here I use TSE screamer and then filter out unwanted lows and highs with annoying mid-range frequencies. For DI lows and highs I use pretty much the same crossover models as in Defiler template. The only different element here is bass rider in front of the BOD pedal. As a result we get even smoother and linear distortion control. However, it has some random volume jumping type of artifacts on continuous notes, so you can decide to ignore this plugin. And another thing is this EQ, which I will explain in a short minute. So all them channels go to bass bus with SHB1 as first plugin and chain. Then cabinet impulse. And on top of that, post correction for drive mod. The idea is to give you sound variations which doesn't have much temporal differences, so you can use both in your mixes. You already know how drive mode sounds, so if you want to use it in clean mode, you should bypass this post correction, mute drive channel, and activate this band on last EQ of DI highs channel. That's how it gonna sound from now. So if you use this technique, you can render your bass 2 times, one with drive mod and one with clean, then put both in your mix and switch between them when needed. For example, use drive for regular parts and clean for atmospheric parts of the song. Anyways, back to the processing. CLA 76 in Bluey mod. Mono reverb. NLS with my console for that wonderful low end. And limiter for volume boost. Okay. So this one is mostly for 6th string with lowest note around F sharp. Hard downstrokes everywhere. Routing. So originally this template has been used in production of upcoming Loneliness in the Crowd album. It started with using real 6-string bass and metal mixing guide number 20 rework bass processing chain, so I used to tweak and update it a lot. And now I replaced real bass with Chronos with few more updates. That's how the actual layers sounds. Starting from VSTI channel where I apply DI correction impulse with NLS to simulate character of original instrument. Then for clean channel I use part of original rework chain, no changes here. Additional bass exciter on top of that, this time 1 octave lower. Post-correction impulse represents pretty complex EQ movements applied to this channel in the main mix. And stereo imager to move low end to the center plus make highs twice wider. Stereo content of this channel is very subtle, so don't be scared by so dramatic enhancement, it's still almost unnoticeable. However, though you may want to ignore this step and get wider low end. And for drive channel I use Screamer with amp for distortion. Cabinet impulse. Mono delay for proper phase interaction. So now both channels go to bass bus with multi-bin compressor on board. Here I only compress low end part of the spectrum. CLA 76 helps to get control on overall dynamics and sort of glue things together. And limiter for RMS gain and peak control. So I think that's it, guys. I'm sorry for lack of uploads on this channel, I mean at least you know that I did important shit. Huge shout out to those who supported me all this time, thanks for staying with me, hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you again in the next one.